Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. June 1st, 2023, we did not have a planning commission in May, so we are back. We had some new audio and video installation in April, so if you don't mind, we're going to test a little bit of how close or distance we get away from these microphones. So if it starts to get a little too loud, just bear with us and please excuse us. With that, it's currently 6:31. I call this meeting to order. First, looking with the commissioners, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. We do have a quorum. With that, we'll move forward into the first approval of the meeting minutes for April 13th, 2023.
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 13th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay. Two recused. So moved. Move forward, we have two agenda items tonight. One's from Public Science Academy and one's a text amendment. Just like to remind people in the audience, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to come up and talk or you come up, please state your name and address and speak into the microphone. Like I said, we'll all get a little bit closer, but there are people kind of listening in. We also want to make sure we capture all this in the recording. So if you don't mind, kind of speak clearly so we can hear you and also have your name and address. So with that, I'd like to ask the city, to Michael Woodman, if you would present the first agenda item tonight.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. The first item before you is Fulton Science Academy is requesting a master plan amendment. This is related to the school expanding their athletic program. With the request, they're looking to construct 4 tennis courts, a soccer field, a field house, concessions, some new parking, as well as a new driveway entrance at the rear of the property. This is a master plan amendment, although it may look like a variance to you. The setbacks are for this particular property. It's part of a master plan, the Cousins West Side master plan. This property is Pod O within that master plan, and the setbacks for that particular property are within the master plan. So to deviate from those setbacks, you need a master plan amendment. So that's what this applicant is here before you this evening. The property, I do have the location map on the overhead. The property is located at 3035 Fanfare Way. So that's the southwest corner of Maxwell Road and Fanfare Way. Fulton Science Academy is a pre-K through 12th grade private school. Their enrollment is approximately 935 students. Of those, I believe the high school driving age of the senior class is about 145 students. This is an aerial of the property. So this is the existing Fulton Science Academy here, with Maxwell coming in. It's their main entrance to the property, and then this is Fanfare Way running alongside of the property. Property is 18.5 acres, Zone CUP, Community Unit Plan, as I mentioned, subject to the Cousins West Side Master Plan, Pod O, for this property. Pod O development regulations required a 40-foot setback along Fanfare Way. In order to allow for 2 of the 4 tennis courts, those 2 of the courts would be within 10 foot of Fanfare Way, as well as some retaining walls for those tennis courts. So this is the site plan that the applicant's proposing. And so you see the large soccer field here, the 4 tennis courts here, with courts 3 and 4 being the courts that need that setback reduction. So the rest of the setback along Fanfare would still remain at the 40 feet. It would just be in this location here. The site has pretty significant topography as well. So the retaining walls that will be surrounding these 2 courts here will be well below the level of the road. The field house is located right here on the north side of the soccer field. The concessions is right here, closer to the tennis courts. And then the additional parking, there's a total of 191 parking spaces on this plan. The new parking represents this parking shown here, and that's about 41 parking spaces. So there's a total of 191 with 41 that includes 41 new parking spaces. And then, of course, the new entrance at the rear of the property. This new entrance is a full access opening. It's aligned with the emblem Alpharetta development across the street. As I mentioned, there's pretty significant topography on the property. So these two courts that are closest to Fanfare Way actually sit about 12 feet below the grade of the sidewalk along Fanfare Way. And then the soccer field sits about 27 feet below the grade of Fanfare Way. There are previous conditions of zoning on the property that, of course, the code requires a landscape strip along Fanfare Way, but those previous conditions of zoning actually required the school to add some evergreen material within this landscape strip to help screen the school from the road. With this request, of course, these are athletic courts and fields. There's lighting associated with those. And with the tennis courts, let me come back to this exhibit. So with the tennis courts, there are a total of 24 lights, so 6 lights for each court. Those lights are about 19 feet tall with the light fixture. Because they sit below the grade of the road, the light fixture will actually be about 8 foot above the grade of Fanfare Way. The soccer field, there are a total of 4 lights lighting up the soccer field. Those lights are much taller. They're 50 feet. But again, with that soccer field being located 27 feet below, those light poles are only about 24 to 25 feet above of the grade of Fanfare. So, of course, we do have adjacent residential to this site. So there are the existing townhomes across Fanfare from this. So with the sports fields and the lighting associated with that, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be any intrusion on the adjacent residential. The applicant did provide a lighting plan and details on the lighting. We did review the lighting against the city's night sky ordinance, and the lighting does meet that. So the lighting is not aimed upwards, it is aimed downwards, and they are using the lighting types that would meet our night sky ordinance. Also, with regard to the foot candles, so we do measure the light at the property line where it adjoins residential, and that's, in this particular instance, we don't directly adjoin residential. There's a right-of-way in between. For the purpose of measuring lighting, we consider that street is not there. So we do measure the lighting measurements at the property line, and the applicant's photometric plan does comply with our night sky ordinance. They are below 1 foot candle as measured at the property line. The applicant did mention in their application that the reason that they needed the 4 tennis courts is for the ability to potentially host tournaments. So we just wanted to get a little bit more information on that. According to the applicant, the sports fields, they do have a closed campus, so the sports fields are meant for their students and the opposition. They're not expecting that there would be large groups of people that are coming to the site due to safety concerns, security concerns. The typical tennis and soccer matches, according to the applicant, would occur between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. on weekdays, and tournaments would likely be Friday and Saturday during that same time frame, 4 to 8 p.m. Since the staff report was uploaded to your packets last Friday, the applicant has worked with our on-call traffic transportation consultant to work through the traffic study. So at the time that we wrote the report, the city's traffic consultant and the applicant weren't fully on the same page. Got them connected and they talked things through. And our traffic consultant is here this evening, Michael Crawford with Columbia Engineering, should you have any questions. But the applicant has complied with all of their previous comments in the traffic study. The traffic study has been updated to reflect the details that they worked out. And the main thing that was worked out was the turn lanes into this driveway at this location here. So the idea was that you would have sufficient stacking in the left turn lane that is heading in this direction coming in here, as well as sufficient stacking for a left turn lane for the people that are turning into Emblem. So there is, I'll show you what that looks like in the latest traffic study. Try to zoom in on this. So at this intersection, so they did align the second driveway up with the Emblem Alpharetta. What they are showing now is there's a left turn lane into Emblem, and they will also be responsible to, Emblem has a right in, right out currently, and they'll be responsible, the school will be responsible to remove that pork chop there that only allows the right in, right out so that they can have a full access opening. They'll also be responsible for all this restriping at this location as well. And that's the recommendations out of the traffic study focus on these improvements at this driveway as well as at their current driveway. And then just going back to this just provides a good perspective, especially as it relates to the lighting on the property. Just kind of gives you an idea of the topography as well on the property. So this represents the Emblem at Alpharetta in this image here. And then you can see this is the existing school building here with the sports fields in this location. Just make sure you can see that. And then on the drawing just below it, this represents the Westwood Park townhomes, so the townhomes that are closest to the school. So Fanfare Way sits right approximately here, and where these little blue areas are shown, that represents the landscape strip with the evergreen landscape material. If you just come across this kind of gives you an idea of the topography. As you come across this, you can see how the tennis courts kind of sit in the hole here. If you really zoom in on this too, you can see the lighting associated with here you can see the lighting associated with the tennis courts, and then the lighting that's associated with the soccer fields. So it really helps that the property kind of sits down in that hole, especially helps diffuse the light, any light intrusion that could potentially get across the street to the residential area. Of course, staff looked at this against the review criteria for a master plan amendment. We believe that the zoning proposal represents, they're expanding a use that's already approved in the master plan. And there were, the original plans for the school did show future development and phases of this particular campus. So they're not asking for anything that they hadn't previously planned for. We did note that the site's topography does help offset some of the impacts to the surrounding properties. We are recommending, if this is approved, limiting that setback reduction to just those two tennis courts that are closest to Fanfare and the associated retaining walls. Also requiring evergreen screening in the landscape, so additional evergreen screening in the landscape strip along Fanfare, as well as placing a time limitation on the use of the athletic field lighting. The applicant did provide a citizen participation report. They did have one resident from the adjacent townhomes that reached out. The resident did not have any concerns other than they asked that someone get some pedestrian lighting installed along Fanfare Way. Also showed this to the public at the June 14th Community Zoning Information Meeting. There were no public comments at that meeting. And staff is recommending approval of this item subject to 12 conditions, and I'll go through those real quickly. Condition 1 is the site plan specific condition, tying it to the site plan by AEC dated 4/3/23 with a reduced 10-foot setback in the area of the tennis courts. Remaining frontage along Fanfare Way shall have a 40-foot setback. 2, building, landscape, and lighting shall be approved by DRB. 3, landscape strip along Fanfare Way shall be supplemented with evergreen landscape material to screen the site along Fanfare Way as approved by DRB. 4, all site lighting, including lighting for athletic field courts, shall comply with the city's night sky ordinance, subject to final approval by DRB. Athletic field courts lighting shall be turned off after 9 p.m. 5, developers shall provide the required decorative pedestrian lighting along the property frontage on Fanfare Way. 6, developers shall assess site landscaping and replace dead, dying, or missing landscape material as approved by DRB. 7, if the proposed improvements impact areas with previous recompense trees shall be replaced with new trees equal to the inches removed since the trees have grown as approved by staff. And I'll just show you what that is just real quick. There's not a lot of trees that are impacted, and there are definitely not any specimen trees that are impacted. These are just there are a few trees back in this area that have been planted, and some of these are recompense trees. So for the removal of some trees with their initial phase of development, they had some recompense plantings. So all we're saying in that condition is that if you disturb any of these trees, they need to be replanted at the current size in a different location. Condition 8, developer shall comply with the North Point Overlay Eco District regulations with final approval by staff at LDP, land disturbance permit, and/or building permit. So you can get eco district measure points for both things that would be on the land disturbance permit as well as for the building. 9, developer shall be responsible for implementing the recommendations of the traffic study prepared by A&R Engineering. And that date should be changed to 6/1/23, so today's date, with final approval by staff. That traffic study was updated to reflect all of the agreements that the applicant had with our traffic consultant, and it does meet their requirements. 10, property owner shall dedicate a 20-foot wide permanent easement to the city through the Georgia 400 buffer for the Alpha Loop project. So this was a previous condition on a master plan amendment on this property a few years ago related to some temporary portable classrooms. But we just wanted to reinforce that we are looking for that easement. The city has not identified the exact location of the Alpha Loop in the buffer, so that's why we have not taken that easement yet. Condition 11 would actually provide access to the Alpha Loop in the tree buffer along this eastern property line here. So condition 11, property owner shall dedicate a 10-foot permanent easement to the city along the eastern property line to provide a connection between Maxwell Road, Fanfare Way sidewalk, and the Alpha Loop. Sidewalk connection through the easement will not be constructed until the Alpha Loop has been constructed. The reason why we wanted to have this access, you have destinations just off this page. So the amphitheater, of course. There is a BRT stop, the bus rapid transit, MARTA, coming up through Georgia 400, this middle of Georgia 400, and there is a stop scheduled at the mall, which this property is just basically across 400 from the North Point Mall. The station's a little bit further up behind the townhome development that occurs just on the adjacent property. But the Alpha Loop, we could see people getting off there, jumping on the Alpha Loop and trying to get over to the amphitheater or other destinations. So that's the reason for that condition. And then condition 12, all previous master plan regulations and conditions of zoning shall remain in effect. And that concludes the presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Woodman, for your presentation. I got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. One is, are you aware of any condemnation in that Georgia DOT buffer up against 400 for the express lanes? Because they have condemnations going up and down that corridor, so I didn't know if that affects this particular property.
We are aware that there are going to be some impacts on the tree buffer there. I believe that I think we had a comment to show any improvements on the site plan. I don't think that there was anything shown on the revised AEC plan.
I'm asking because most of those buffers disappear during that plan that they have, and some of them have elevated exits. They're elevated up.
Yeah.
So just kind of wanted to see how that affected maybe the school and distance.
I don't have that information with me this evening. The applicant is here. We also have, I'm not sure how well-versed our traffic engineer is on that particular project or if they know exactly what's going on here, but we do have those folks here today that we may want to ask that question of.
My second question goes back to fanfare
Mhm.
along the landscaping strip. I didn't really kind of see a robust or detailed plan that shows how much plantings are in there. Must have missed it if it was. But is there barriers also there that cars can't go through and accidentally drop? You said it was like a 27-foot drop into those fields. Is there some kind of barriers from the street?
I'm not 100% if there are any barriers. We definitely have a landscape strip there. The whole idea of the requirement for the landscape strip is just to be decorative, but because we were trying to screen some of these things, we put that condition on there on previous requests as well as this request to kind of beef that up. We typically wouldn't require them to actually show the plan. I do sometimes request that. I think in this particular instance, because they're working with existing landscape material, I think the first thing that they're going to need to do is assess what material is not in good condition anymore, pull that out, and then they'll know how much room they're working with in order to supplement that with the evergreen material. But we did not get a plan from the applicant.
Thank you. Hand it over to the board for any questions.
Yep.
I just have a couple of questions. Is the microphone working okay?
Yeah.
Hey, the lighting, I know that there's newer athletic lighting that directs down, and I'm hoping that that there's investment in that type of lighting, because there can be athletic lighting that lights everything, and then there's the directed lighting that really, it does the job of lighting a field, but does not impact areas beyond which it's intended to.
So we do not have, I don't have an expert on staff that specifically reviews lighting. However, we do have staff that is responsible to oversee the design review board. And design review board looks at site lighting plans all the time. And so I got with him, Brett Schroeder is the person that does that. And we looked at this plan together with their lighting plan. And we looked at this against the night sky ordinance, and he felt that it was in compliance with that and met all of our requirements. If there are new technology, I'm not familiar if there's like more recent
I'm
technologies.
not up to date on the most, but I do know that, there are times when people have tried to solve lighting problems at other schools, and that there are better solutions than some. So
Okay.
I was curious about that.
Yeah, I'll definitely bring that up with Brett, especially if this does get approved. I'll make sure that that's something that DRB is considering, that we are getting, the latest technology there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I ask one more?
Yeah.
So you and I spoke earlier. The conditions are really well thought out and obviously meant to, help the flow of traffic around there, but also protect the residents. Now, anybody who has property has the ability to rent it out. And I don't know whether, the school would want to rent it out. I know that people try to rent out Fulton County schools often. I just wanted to make sure that the conditions that you all recommend and that the council ultimately will decide on would actually apply and make sure that they would apply to anybody who rents it as well, because they're intended to protect the residents.
Yeah, so the conditions will run with the property. So they will be on the property. They are so anyone that is using the property, whether it's the property owner, the school, or if they have a third party that's using the property, either one would be subject to these conditions. So the conditions apply to anyone that is using that property.
Thank you. Michael, the traffic study, I guess it was the May 22nd version that we had in our packet. When I look at page 1 of the traffic study, it references that in addition to the sports fields and the concession stands, they're also adding rooms to the existing school building. And I don't recall seeing that on the site plan anywhere. So has that changed? It says the improvements will consist of addition of rooms to the school building, such as an innovation center room and a music room. No classrooms will be added to increase student capacity.
So the innovation room and the music room this is the innovation room. So this is at the front of the school. This is like a drop-off area here. So this is in the front of the school. It's just a sidewalk area and landscape area currently. And then this is the music room on the side. The applicant, these did not require the reduction in the setback. They were allowed regardless of this master plan amendment. So the applicant was allowed to move forward with these two items. So they've gone through land disturbance permit and building permit, I believe, is in review or maybe has been approved. But I know that they went to DRB and land disturbance. So that's what that's referring to.
Okay, actually, I don't think I didn't see this in my packet, this particular site plan. It wasn't in our packet. Can you push it up so we can see the whole? Yeah, perfect.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I forgot that I zoomed in on that.
Oh, that's a lot easier to see. Okay, so is that what all the construction is that's happening there currently? All the
Yes.
grading and development that we see currently
Yes.
is for those 2 new rooms? Got it.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you identify on here the retaining wall? Is that noted on here?
So this line here
Mm-hmm.
and there, those are retaining walls. So this sits, remember this, the road sits much higher than, so this wall is needed to hold up the road basically from the court.
Got it.
So these walls, I think, are about 8 foot tall.
Yeah,
But the
that's
top
what.
of the wall is about 5.5 to 6 feet below the sidewalk along Fanfare Way.
So if you're walking along the sidewalk or if you're driving, you'll be able to see a couple of feet of the retaining wall?
Well, hopefully after the landscape strip is supplemented with some additional evergreen
Yep.
material, you won't be able to see through there. But yes, you would, until the landscaping grows in, when you're looking down here, you will be looking down at the courts, and you will not see the wall. The wall will be down below the level of the road.
I didn't see it in the conditions, but did you contemplate any kind of requirement regarding the facing of the retention wall, stone or brick?
I didn't because the wall faces into the tennis courts. We
Mhm.
typically will not put any additional requirements on the wall unless they're facing outward so that they're publicly facing. Then we will, we'll put requirements that you have to terrace them if they're over a certain height, or if they're visible from the public right away, that they would be a certain material. So we did not put any conditions for that reason.
Okay. And would DRB contemplate that? I know this is going to be reviewed by DRB, but.
I mean, it's definitely something they always do. They're very good at looking at retaining walls. I don't know that DRB would put any specific condition on the materials that they use for the wall, given that it won't be visible from the public right away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
The last question I have for you is, condition number 11 that talks about the sidewalk connection through the easement won't be constructed until the Alpha Loop has been constructed. Who is constructing the sidewalk? Is that the city's responsibility?
It would be the city's
Okay.
responsibility. And the reason this came up, a question from another commissioner, and I just want to explain. So this connection is not on any kind of planning document. And so to give an applicant impact fee credits for doing an improvement on behalf of the city, it needs to be a system improvement. It's not part of any plan. So we would not be able, that's why we didn't condition them to build that connection. We're just asking for the easement in order for the city to be able to install that, make that connection.
And we'll make that when,
At the time that
Yep.
it's appropriate. Again, we don't even, at this point, with the Alpha Loop in this particular section of the tree buffer, we did a trail feasibility study with MKSK kind of in the middle of the pandemic. And that kind of that's kind of the first step before you go into actual planning, design documents. So we don't have the exact alignment of the Alpha Loop. We know it's going to go through here, but where exactly it goes
Right.
through here, we're not sure yet.
okay, yep, makes sense. That is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. I can't remember when I drove by this, but is the front of the entrance, is it gated at night so it's locked?
I do believe it's gated, and I assume that if they've got a gate there, that they would lock it. but
So
that-
would there be a gate, Michael, at the new entrance?
I think that would be a question best answered by the applicant. I would assume that they're trying to close off their campus that it would, but I think that would be best asked of the
So
applicant.
I don't remember there being a fence around the property, correct?
I don't recall. I'm not 100% if there is.
So I'm just trying to get at, would it be possible that people could come through without a fence or anything, could they come in and have access to the soccer fields and the tennis courts, turn on the lights? I guess that's a question I should ask the applicant.
Yeah, I mean, I think any property is at risk of someone trespassing on it, and I think that they have security concerns being a school. So I can only assume that they'll be wanting to take measures in order to secure the school. But I do think it would probably be best answered by the applicant.
Okay, thank you. They don't? Thank you.
Okay. Michael, I had a couple questions. And I think we spoke briefly about, my one question follows on Commissioner Brady's question about Georgia 400. The construction plans and designs for the expansion of Georgia 400 right now would bring the traffic noise closer to the subject site. And given that it's in a natural bowl, I'm a little concerned about the degree to which the noise will impact the utility of the space, would drown out things like coaching direction, what have you. I am also not certain, because I haven't seen final designs of the Georgia 400 expansion, whether noise abatement walls are going to be carried up through that part of the corridor. So this is probably more of a comment than a question. I think it should be in the record somewhere that should be a concern that should be looked into and addressed, because I think it will impact the utility of that space. The only other concern I wanted to raise, and again, this is probably going to be a conversation with the applicant, is I heard the discussion, particularly with reference to the traffic study, about not expecting high volumes of activity and traffic for tournaments. Tournaments typically involve multiple teams. So to me, I would say that's probably not a correct assumption, that you would probably see far more both participant and spectator activity than I believe is being discussed in this traffic study. And I'm also seeing maybe not adequate parking. So I would raise that as a little bit of a red flag that should be spoken to and addressed.
I'll let the applicant respond to that, but I will say they didn't show, we brought some of those concerns forward to the applicant as well, and we didn't see that there was any kind of like large spectator areas or anything
Right.
like that. But again, I'll let the applicant respond on that
Okay,
one.
thank you.
No further questions. I am a little surprised that staff didn't put more requirements on landscaping. I know a lot of this says DRB through a lot of this. So you're asking DRB to basically condition some of all the designs on the property. I'm a little surprised staff didn't jump in and require a little bit more. Just a comment offhand, but thank you so much for your presentation.
Okay.
With that, we'll ask the applicant to please step forward. If you don't mind, just as a reminder, you step forward, just please state your name, last name, and your address, and please speak into the microphone. Thank you. We'll make sure.
Sorry about that.
We might have to rewind on that.
Does it work now? Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Jim Weiner with Make 3 Architecture Planning and Design. My address is 1075 Brady Avenue, Atlanta 30318. I am the architect for Fulton Science Academy. We have Abdul Amir here, who is the traffic engineer, and Serkan Siglum, who is the program manager and contractor for the Fulton Science Academy. I just want to make a few big picture points. FSA is a very successful K through 12 STEAM school. What they lack are athletic facilities, so this is an opportunity to add those. They also need to just improve the circulation for pickup and drop off, and that's the reason for the extended drive and the second means of egress and ingress. They have very successful tennis and soccer program. They have over 100 students in their tennis program, and so the forecourts gives them an opportunity to have tennis classes during the day for all of those students within a reasonable time frame. To respond to the concern about tournaments and traffic associated with tournaments, the traffic engineer found that the peak demand, the peak traffic event for the property is pickup and drop off. And to Michael's point, there isn't a lot of seating provided for tournaments. FSA only plans to have singles tournaments with just a few schools. Any larger tournament would have to be at a tennis center with 8 or 10 courts. We've been working with Michael and the city to address their concerns and respond to their questions, and we'll continue to collaborate with the city. I know landscape is important. I know it's also important to the DRB. We've been before them a few times. The first time for an addition completed in 2019 for the Fulton Science Academy, and then most recently for the music practice addition and the Innovation Center. And personally, landscaping is is a concern of mine as a designer, and I know that it's something that the Fulton Science Academy wants to improve. I would like to see an evergreen buffer along Fanfare Way. Fulton Science Academy has reviewed all of the conditions, and they accept the conditions. One of their concerns is that, they're happy to provide the easements for the Alpha Loop. They just want to know that when the Alpha Loop is designed, their reasonable security concerns are addressed. Because as a school, they have a duty and responsibility to their students to make sure that they provided a safe and secure environment for them. So you brought up a number of questions, and Michael did such a good job of reviewing it. I'll spare you kind of the redundancy of maybe a review that's not as good as what he just did. You ask about GDOT. The application that we submitted shows a property line that already reflects property that GDOT has taken from FSA, or they have condemned and purchased from FSA. GDOT does plan a sound wall along that property line. FSA kind of shares the concerns that you raised about just the sound of Georgia 400, and we hope that that sound wall will improve things, although they're not exactly beautiful. A question was asked about fencing. FSA has fencing now. They are in the permitting process to add gates to their current entrance. They do want to close the campus in the evenings. They don't want people, on the fields or on the courts at night. The lighting controls will be inside a building, so people won't be able to kind of sneak onto the property and turn the lights on unless they broke into the building. We have been working with our electrical engineer and lighting consultants on the lighting, and that's, if you look at that drawing, it's a fairly elaborate drawing that shows foot candle, light spillage off the property, and we're under 1 foot candle. We're mostly less than a half a foot candle. So the light fixtures have shielding on them. And as Michael pointed out, the tennis courts and the soccer field are both well below the sidewalk. And so you're kind of looking over those. And I would anticipate that with a fence and a green hedge, an evergreen hedge, that you probably won't see the tennis court lights at all, and you probably have to be in the apartments or the townhouses to even see the tops of the soccer field lights. But that shielding will prevent the lighting from kind of spilling off the field and getting in the eyes of people who are looking towards the property. I can put the plan on the overhead and just answer any kind of questions that you might have. I don't know that I've covered everything that you brought up. But is there anything in particular that you would like me to review or respond to?
I did have one quick, easy question. And this is broad, and it's for the applicant in general. Given that FSA is very successful and may very well be looking at opportunities for growth going forward, by taking this space for athletic fields, you preclude the ability to expand the building classroom space. Any thoughts about that?
We have gone through a lot of master planning iterations, and I'll point out a couple of things on the plan. This addition was done and completed in 2019. That building was designed for a 3rd floor.
Okay.
And there's a foundation for an elevator should they choose to do that. Also on the master plan, they've looked at the possibility of doing a performing arts center here and constructing that above parking. When we were doing master planning for the athletic facilities, we looked at a number of schemes, one of which included a building with tennis courts underneath and a soccer field above. We also looked at ways to bridge over the detention pond, and ultimately we concluded that this was the most cost-effective approach, to just put the soccer field and the tennis courts at grade. But yes, they'll, between that potential 3rd floor and this area here for a future performing arts center, they will have maxed out on the property. I do know that a few years ago they looked at a property to develop another campus. That property was available, and then it became no longer available. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Do you have a landscaping plan?
AEC is the civil engineer and landscape architecture firm, and they'll develop a landscape plan to submit to the design review board. But we have asked them to, not develop this further until we know whether or not it's a go or no-go. There's a landscape plan that was developed and approved by the design review board for the music practice edition and the innovation center. FSA has also expressed an interest or stated an interest in doing a landscape master plan just to beautify the entire campus. So it's a commitment of theirs, and it is something that the design review board really does kind of press you on. You'd also ask about the wall surfaces. The design review board requires us to provide a palette of materials for their review and approval as well.
You walk me a little through the traffic flow through the site, because around the athletic kind of fields, because as you mentioned, I'm sure everyone gets together, has tennis, whether it's after school or during school, whatever those. I'm really kind of thinking after school and why you have so much parking there. Is it sufficient parking, and what that traffic flow kind of looks like?
So you can see that this is the current entrance right here, and this is drop-off for the elementary school kids. High school and middle school drop-off is here. But you have very good through circulation both here, coming out onto Fanfare Road or entering at Fanfare Road. And if you kind of pass this turnaround, you can also loop back around and exit this way. We're picking up additional parking as part of the athletic field additions. The site is constrained so that the seating capacity really just is not that great. So if the school can handle the parking demands during a typical day, it will be able to handle the parking demands for the athletic events, which would be singles tennis tournaments and a soccer match. Those would be events that occur after school. And as far as traffic flow is concerned, I mean, I can share my intuitive grasp of the traffic flow, but we could ask, if you'd like to hear from the traffic engineer, we could ask him to come up and speak.
Now, I'm just kind of thinking through it, to be honest with you. I was thinking of the after-school kind of programs and thinking, would people park up at Fanfare, walk around it, but if they have that, what would be the worst results kind of in the area, or what that kind of impact would be? And that's what I was just thinking through. Kind of out loud. I apologize, but that was a little bit of a.
Well, it would be much easier for them to park on the site internally than to try and park on Fanfare Road and walk all the way around to the tennis courts or the soccer field.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll turn it over to public comment. And we'll open up the floor for public comment. After public comment, the applicant's welcome to come back and make comments or have any rebuttal comments they would like. So with that, we'll open it up for public comment. Those in favor of the application, please step forward. Seeing none, any opposed to the application, please step forward.
I have Carl Hoagland. Come forward, please.
Just as a reminder, again, just state your name and address and into the microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carl Hoagland. I live at 1808 Adagio Drive. I am the president of the Westwood Park Homeowners Association, which are the townhomes directly across the street. We're in opposition for multiple reasons. There's a lot going on here, and initially in the public notice letter to everybody, this was not presented to the layman as a master plan amendment. It was a zoning or a setback variance for some tennis courts. Also, what was not included in that letter was any mention of the lights for the soccer field that are 25 feet above Fanfare. I know you just heard that from the townhomes, you probably wouldn't be able to barely see the tops of the lights for the soccer fields. Actually, you'll be looking right at them for all those that are on Fanfare. So that's largely why there wasn't anybody to come to the informational meeting. So we certainly have an issue with that. and now, you know, more people are nervous about what's coming. Equally of importance, while I appreciate the traffic study addressing that immediate intersection, I think if you look at how people come in and go out, they'll come in the main entrance now, they'll go out the back entrance, immediately turn right onto Arch Summit, take them back up to West Side Parkway. That intersection is not signalized. So as soon as it backs up, and we're talking 15 cars, then our community is essentially blockaded. We have one point of ingress and egress, and it's right there. And so we don't think that's been taken into consideration. As far as the lighting study itself, I think it needs to be re-reviewed, because as soon as you cross Fanfare, everything does go to zero. No intrusion of light. The only problem is Fanfare is not straight as the curve, and it's following that curve, and lights just don't work like that. So based on just that, we're opposed to what's been presented here, how it's been presented, certainly. And since we are also, part of the master plan, we should have been notified a little bit more of what's going on. Just wanted to let y'all know we're in opposition to it, and at least would want y'all to table it and not vote on it next month until some of the questions can be answered.
Thank you for your comments.
Absolutely, thank you.
Asking for any other comments that are opposed to the application? Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close down the public comment, and we'll ask the applicant to step forward for any additional comments or rebuttal against the comments he heard.
Is it working? It's working.
Yep.
Until just now, we have not received any feedback from the Westwood Park Homeowners Association, except for the one individual that contacted me, and I forwarded her contact information to Michael. And she supported the tennis courts and requested lighting along Fanfare, pedestrian lighting, which we've agreed to do. All of the drawings that Michael just showed you were in the letter sent to all of the property owners within 500 feet, including the drawings showing the soccer field lighting. So there was mention of soccer field lighting. In the letter, I invited people to contact me. I said I would be happy to meet with them, be happy to go meet with their homeowners association. I'm still happy to do that. I'm confident that the lighting study is an accurate and a good one. I would not present it if I didn't believe that. I'm a professional and I take my work very seriously, and I know that if it wasn't a good one, I'd be hearing about it after those lights were installed. And as far as the traffic condition is concerned, the traffic will be improved with the addition of the loop road and the second means of ingress and egress. We're not increasing the traffic demand or the number of students with this project. We're just providing better circulation. I think I've addressed the points that he's made, and I want to assure him and the Westwood Park Homeowners Association that we do take that lighting seriously. And, it is, those townhouses are 39 feet above the soccer field. The soccer field lights are 50 feet. And that's the ground floor of those townhouses. So then you've got, ground floor and 2 floors above that. So the top of those lights relative to the townhouses is, what is that, 14 feet, something like that. The other thing that I'll point out, the townhouses are here. They're looking in this direction and this direction, and obviously you can kind of rotate your head and you get a cone of vision, but the view cone is not directly at, it is not directly at those courts or at the soccer field. And any kind of typical tree, either a monumental tree or an ornamental tree, is going to be higher than the top of the lights at the soccer field. So I feel like we've done a very effective job of designing this so that it's very low impact for the neighbors. And I believe you have, of course, you have a copy of the letter sent out to all of the neighbors. We sent a draft of that to city staff first to make sure that it was okay. I followed their format. I think all of the information, or I know all of the information that's been presented to you today is in that letter. Here are the townhouses. Here's the soccer field. Here's the soccer field lighting. This is just about a 20-foot tree, some kind of a hedge. The lighting would be shielded. So it's a very, you would have to go to some trouble to look at it and look for those lights, and you'd want to kind of, you'd have to work to look at the fields as well as the court.
I just have a comment. And I appreciate your presentation, and I certainly understand you sending the notices to the public and trying to get their feedback. And I certainly understand the president. So I would just suggest perhaps that you two could meet before city council and
Happy
see
to
if
do
you
that.
could address your concerns before the council meeting. And I think it might help city council in their decision to move it forward.
Happy to have that meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
Comment also.
Yep.
So what we saw was a slice, so you like a cross-section of the fields and the townhomes and that. But I think a point that was made that I think is probably very valid is that with the topography being the way that it is, the first floor of one townhome may not be where the first floor of another townhome is. So there may be, and since light goes everywhere, it doesn't just go in a straight line for us, there may be, and I'm hopeful that there can be some accommodation. I mentioned before the shielded lights, and you said they were doing that, but the other thing is that sometimes those shielded lights actually have the ability to be placed far lower than you would typically see typical like sports lights. I mean, we've seen football fields and baseball fields lit by lights that were purposefully not posted quite as high, but because of the newer technology and the shielding, could completely light the field.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We lowered the poles from a normal 60 feet. They're typically 60 feet and higher to 50 feet because of the shielding. We looked at dropping the poles to 40 feet, but that meant increasing the number of poles from 4 to 6 and increasing the number of lamps to get the light levels on the field. The light, the further you get from the sidewalk, so along the sidewalk, we're at less than 1 foot candle. The further you get from that sidewalk, the lower the foot candle levels will be. So we can ask the consultants to extend that study even further, just to kind of demonstrate that. As far as the topography is concerned, that section of Fanfare Way along the kind of length of the apartment or the townhomes is at about the same elevation. So from that corner unit, and we can kind of do a study showing every one of them, but it's not, that topography levels off along Fanfare Way.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Thank you. It's always a delicate balance when with neighbors and looking at these applications where there's new developments, there's new changes in the community, but they have to be equitable, and we have to be balanced between all the different parties and how we kind of view those. So it takes time to vet all these pieces out. With a comment, I will say is I wish there was a landscaping plan, because I think if we were looking at a landscaping plan here, talking about the light and the noise, it would be a lot easier to kind of understand that buffer from the road down to the fields and protecting the neighbors. But I know it's to DRB, but it's hard to kind of digest this a little bit tonight. So I appreciate the applicant for their presentation. Just for a moment, I'd like staff to come forward, because there was I want to be technical just for a second, making sure that everyone received the proper notifications, legally that did go out, that there was a master plan kind of amendment that was mentioned by the public. So I want to make sure we kind of close that loop a little bit, make sure you confirm everything was properly delivered to the community.
Yes, the applicant did provide us a draft of the letter that they were going to send out. We did review that it contained all the correct information, and we did review and approve the applicant send that out. City also sent out a notification letter accurately showing what the request was.
Thank you.
And Michael, just to follow up on that, was this application included in the community zoning information meeting? Was this particular application shown at the
Yes.
community zoning information meeting?
Yes, it was the June 14th. I'm sorry, the May 14th. Let me go back to that. It was the May 14th. The staff report did say June 14th, but it was the May CZIM meeting. This
Okay.
was shown. I did attend that meeting, and there were no one from the public came to look at this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more comment. Whenever athletic facilities are involved and they're coming in after there's already residents in the area, all the I's may be dotted, all the T's may be crossed, but a regular person just living their life and going to work and, raising their families or doing what they're doing, they get something and they don't look at this stuff every month. They don't look at the types of plans that the council and the planning commission see every month. So maybe when there's that kind of an impact, because that athletic facilities are going to, and I know it's not a common occurrence, but I think there's a legitimate claim that somebody might have just been looking at their regular thing and seeing that something not that big was happening and not necessarily understanding it. I'm not saying that there aren't some really good things in this plan, because I think having 2 entrances and exits is an excellent, improvement to the site. Might make sense to have the exits and the entrances going both directions to avoid what the resident mentioned. So, but I'm not a traffic engineer, so I can't say. But I have a great empathy for somebody who has something happen and they're, it's big community, zoning or some change to the plan, and it's not something that happens to you every day as a homeowner.
Well, with that, we'll go ahead and continue to open up the floor to the commissioners for any comments or motions.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to just make a general comment, and that's echoing what Commissioner Richards said, and that is for the FSA to work with the neighbors, because when I look at this, you're going to turn the lights off by 9 o'clock, and I think during the summer it's probably not so bad. Maybe during the winter it might be a little aggravating, but as long as the lights are off, and then make sure that you do a lot of screening with green, plants and trees and things like that to block it because if they're in their homes in the evening and the lights from the tennis courts or the soccer field are coming over and you can hear a lot more noise because right now, once school's out, I'm sure it's pretty quiet over there. So it's going to be an adjustment for them is to make sure that you work with the neighbors and be a good partner, which I know you would be.
One comment following up on the conversation earlier about tournaments. I remain a little skeptical that tournaments will stay small-scale events. So to the point that there's concern about additional traffic that will impact neighboring communities, I would just make a large suggestion that city make a note that there should maybe be a subsequent traffic study, particularly at the unsignalized intersection, just to make sure that the folks in that community can effectively get in and out during peak hours. And in the event that it's identified there is an issue with access to their community, that perhaps it would have to go into the next budget cycle to consider adding a signal.
I'll make one quick comment. I'll be very, I don't like number 3. I'm just going to say it. The comments on here, I look at it going, shall be supplemented, and I wish it would say heavily planted and add, by staff or something like that, because I keep looking at this, and that landscape strip around Fanfare is so important for the neighbors that live there. Those who are in there will block some of those lights we're kind of talking about. It's so sparse the way you look at it now. It's down in, I understand it's down in a bowl, but if we, that makes a big difference for neighbors, not to see the fields, first of all, not to see the lights, not to hear the noise coming off. But I don't think it has the weight that it deserves on number 3. So that's just my one comment.
So are you suggesting to change the wording there, Chairman?
I technically can't do that.
I have a question. Can I ask
Okay.
staff? Michael, if you wouldn't mind, just to follow up on the chairman's comments with number 3, and I think I've seen this in other, not school-related applications, but I know in the past we've gotten specific about caliper, height, those types of things in regards to landscape strips and screening. And I know what you said earlier. I think there's an existing strip there now. Obviously, with all the construction that's going on there, it's going to need to be a lot of changes need to happen there. But would you help us craft something here that is a little bit more substantial in regards to the language? Because I agree, it is supplemental and evergreen. Should we consider perhaps saying there needs to be at a minimum height when they're planted, or a minimum caliper?
I mean, that's certainly up to the board. You could certainly add something in there. I will tell you, typically, it's a 2-inch caliper tree is our minimum. If it's a recompense tree, it's a 4-inch caliper. For an evergreen, a 4-inch caliper tree equates to about a 10 to 13-foot evergreen. But typically, the reason why we left the condition 3 as it is worded currently with DRB approving it is we do have 2 landscape architects on DRB that really have the professional expertise to work with folks when they get to DRB to kind of work through some of those issues, the proper species of tree or shrub, the proper spacing of that. That's why we just said, this needs to be reviewed by DRB with their final approval. The other thing going on here too is you do have an existing landscape strip, so there's already landscaping there. That landscape strip, there has been some evergreen supplemented in it with previous master plan amendment on the property. And the fact that we have the other condition here that asks them to assess the condition of the existing landscaping on the site and to replace the missing, dead, or dying landscaping, we don't really know. That's why we kind of condition this to go back to DRB.
Mhm.
I would say if you want to make condition 3 a little bit more robust, I mean, you could identify specific evergreen tree types or sizes you could add, with a minimum size. I know that minimum size that I would suggest is probably the 10 to 13-foot evergreen. That's at planting. To create a screen, our code requires that the screen have 2 years of growth to create an opaque screen.
So are you suggesting the word screening kind of obviously predicts a heavily planted area?
Well, we do have, the term screen is in here. I mean, what you could do is you could say landscape strip along Fanfare Way shall be supplemented with evergreen landscape material to create an opaque screen along Fanfare Way as approved by DRB. And I do think that DRB really, they've got that professional expertise with the 2 landscape architects. And although we do have our city arborist who's well-versed with these different types of plant material, I really think that the DRB members really bring some added value in working with applicants.
And I like the additional language that you just offered up, because I think what it makes it clear what the intention is. The intention is to create an opaque screen. And so the experts can decide, the landscape architects, what that looks like as far as what types of evergreens and the caliper and so forth. So
Yeah, that can, if you changed it to what that may require is if there are areas where they have a grouping of deciduous material, there may be some of that material that has to come out
Right.
in order to replant some evergreen material to create that screen.
okay, yeah, I like that too. Thank you, Michael.
And then as a reminder, we have number 9, am I correct, changing the date on number 9?
Yes.
Dated from 5/20 to 6/1.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion to approve MP-23-03 Fulton Science Academy, subject to the conditions as read by staff with 2 changes. Condition number 3, landscape strip along Fanfare Way shall be supplemented with evergreen landscape material to create an opaque screen along Fanfare Way as approved by DRB. And change to condition number 9, striking the date of May 22nd, 2023, and replacing it with June 1st, 2023. And that's the end of my changes.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes. And this will go to City Council on June 26th. With that, we have the next agenda item, which is the UDC text amendment, zoning procedures law. Molly, you mind presenting?
Yes,
From
thank you.
there?
If y'all want me to go down there, I'm happy to. Okay. So the changes to the UDC that are presently before you are the product of a change to the zoning procedures law that were adopted by the state of Georgia last year. That change to the zoning procedures law, so as you know, the local governments in the state are given the authority to provide for the zoning of land, but the cities and counties are limited in their zoning authority procedurally. We have to comply with the zoning procedures law in any approvals of zoning that we have. And so the zoning procedures law was probably taken up to provide some clarification that there's been some ambiguity in the law for a little while. In 2017, there was a court case called Diversified that really kind of gummed things up from the zoning procedures standpoint, in that it kind of called into question how you appealed various zoning decisions and what kind of zoning decisions were appealed what way. And so the legislature took it upon themselves to try and clarify that with this zoning procedures law amendment. And that's where you see, if you actually pull the zoning procedures law, the various terms, legislative versus quasi-judicial. But when they did that, so a zoning, for instance, is a legislative decision. You appeal it to the court, and the court looks at any evidence, basically. They can, you go through discovery, and information is provided to make your case. A quasi-judicial decision, for instance, a variance, is reviewed on the record. So any evidence that is presented to the Planning Commission and then ultimately to the City Council, if someone were to appeal a quasi-judicial decision, then they get to review. The court only reviews based on the record. So that's the distinction that we're talking about. But in the zoning procedures law, they tried to address that. And when they started doing that, they defined quasi-judicial boards and officers and added some new provisions in to address variances. So the zoning procedures law, up until this most recent revision, didn't actually have anything requiring certain procedures as to the approval of variances. But in describing quasi-judicial officers and boards, it captures a lot more than just variances. And so you'll see in the amendment, we're talking about changes to the procedure related to shooting ranges or to the adult entertainment establishment approvals. Because when those decisions are being made, the council would be acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. The Historic Preservation Commission is acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. The Board of Appeals, same thing. And so when a variance is approved or any of those other types of quasi-judicial decisions are made, the new revisions to the zoning procedures law say that we have to provide notice, and that would be 30 days before the public hearing. We have to provide a letter to the actual applicant, letting them know. And those are the changes that you see reflected mostly throughout the entirety of the UDC. In addition to that, and as you'll know, the general zoning procedures that we've been following has always been notice of between 15 and 45 days. It's probably not something that's at the front of your mind, because that's something that staff takes care of for us. But so as to ease the burden on staff now that they have this new requirement for all the quasi-judicial authorities and boards and decisions, the other change that you'll see, the predominant change, is that zoning decisions, the special use permits, the rezoning decisions, changes to the text of the code, all of those are now going to have a 30-day notice as opposed to the 15 to 45. Just so that they have one timeline that staff is working for, reduces the possibility of having an error of inadequate notice. So it provides some uniformity within the UDC. And then another change that I'm sure you saw had to do with how public hearings are actually conducted. So prior to the change in the zoning procedures law, we had to have procedures related to public hearings. But the new change says that actually has to be adopted by ordinance. And so we have to say in our ordinance that you get 10 minutes per side. And you obviously can provide more than that. There's a wide range of how jurisdictions handle the actual public hearing process, whether they time it to a T, 10 minutes, a buzzer goes off and you have to step down, versus something more like what the City Council here does, where there's pretty much unlimited time. They're going to hear from anybody who wants to speak. But we have to put in the 10 minutes per side. That's required by law now. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's a pretty general overview of the reason for the changes that are in the draft and are required by state law. And I did mention that this was adopted last year, but there's a grace period until July 1st of this year, so we are on trajectory to get this adopted in time for for that deadline of July 1st.
Ms. Eslin, I have a couple of questions. First, not that long ago, we were presented with some guidelines on postponing, tabling, deferring, that sort of thing. And I would assume then that this impacts what happens if we do any one of those. So could I ask that we revisit those directions for us with an understanding of what that's going to mean to the applicant and what that'll mean about when it comes back to Planning Commission, if it does, just for our own edification?
Absolutely.
Okay, that would be
I
great.
can discuss that with staff, absolutely.
And second, my ears picked up a little bit when you said we have to provide a minimum of 10 minutes per side. So in the instance of there being no comments and a very brief presentation, do we sit here and stare at each other for 10 minutes?
Absolutely not. It
Okay.
just is the opportunity. So if there's no one
Okay.
there to take advantage of it, there's certainly no reason to just sit around and twiddle our thumbs. Once it's called for the public hearing, if no one, acknowledges that they want to speak, then you can continue proceeding to close the public hearing, and taking the matter to the board.
Thank you. I know it's a stupid question, but I
Not at
have
all.
seen procedural items like that actually be required to be observed, so.
No,
wanna
no,
make sure.
no. It's
Thank you.
just if they want to. And just because there's a speaker and they only want to talk for 2 minutes, we don't have to, get them to speak. Yeah, they don't have to.
Although we've seen them do that.
We have,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I think we observed more 3-minute rule for individuals, and then for if you represent an HOA, you had an expanded session of maybe up to 10 minutes.
So it would be per side. So it wouldn't be based on the speaker. So, theoretically, you could have one speaker who could take up the 10 minutes. You don't generally see that. And I know that the city council typically doesn't see that either. But it does happen. And one of the opportunities that's in here is for it to be extended. You can cut it off at 10 minutes, or you can allow it to keep going. I also represent the Planning Commission in Forsyth County and in Barrow, and when they have a particularly, contentious zoning, it might take 10 minutes for the first 2 people to speak, and then they'll vote to extend the time. Might even ask for a show of hands, how many people are here, how many people want to speak, encourage people to say new things, rather than, just repeating the same thing. But there are definitely ways procedurally to make the public hearing efficient.
You have a lot of dates in here, like the city shall have 90 days to approve certain applications and things like that. Are those, how did they shift? Did it used to be lower and we raised it up?
I
or did
don't
we
think
lower
there
it
was
down?
anything on that, and frankly, because we had to have some sort of a procedure in there, I put that in there, so that there would be, a time frame for application. That is a best practice, so that something doesn't sit without any action being taken on it.
Yeah, well done. So with that, any questions, I guess, for council?
No, if everybody's okay with this.
See none,
Yes.
I'll open it up for public comment before any votes, just to make sure if there's anyone in the audience who wants to talk about it. So anybody in favor, please step forward.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, you got 10 minutes. Anybody opposed, please step forward. Seeing none, then I'll close down public opinion and come back to the commissioners for further discussion or a motion.
If everybody's okay, no comment, I'll make a motion to approve PH-23-08 UDC text amendment, zoning procedures law.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise the right hand. So moved, motion passes. And this will go before city council, I believe, on June 19th, so they can have a dual reading. And I don't see any other agenda items. Anybody, anything to add or open up before we adjourn for the evening? If not,
The only thing I would say, just this had nothing to do with, except for the microphones tonight. I could hear Katie really well. I could hear Karen, but Michael, I had a really hard time hearing you tonight.
I'll concur with that. I couldn't hear you at all.
Yeah, so, yeah, I would just note that that's really hard for the audience, particularly when they are trying to listen and they can't hear what's going on. So that's the only note I would say.
that was a great comment. Anybody else? Seeing that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much.